thank you all so much for being here with us today for our webinar and this intimate conversation that we're having called Seeing Ourselves Clearly, Autism, Friendship, and Empowered Advocacy. April is Autism Appreciation Month and Acceptance Month. And so today our conversation is really about hearing from autistic voices and from two really great friends, Alex Generous and Ella Dolly. I am so grateful because they are both incredible advocates and friends that I actually met at a conference, one of the first autism conferences I went to as a co-founder. And Alex and Ella, I don't know that I've told you both, but you're my first autistic girlfriends. And I felt so lucky to be invited into your girl group, which is why I'm grateful to have this conversation. Alex and Ella met as teenagers and are now mid-career professionals. And so we're diving in today about identity as autistic and neurodivergent women and adults, about self-advocacy, and also getting into, very frankly, some of the survival strategies that they and other neurodivergent individuals have had to develop. But from that, how it's evolved into agency, clarity, and healing. And so they'll be sharing today some of the strategies that have been helpful for them that we hope is helpful for all that are here today joining us too. So this is just going to be an intimate conversation between the three of us, kind of like podcast style. So we invite you to relax, grab a drink, join the conversation. We will have the Q&A available in the chat if you want to drop questions. And we'll have time for Q&A at the end with Alex and Ella. So without further ado, welcome Alex and Ella. And since you're both such good friends, I thought we'd start with something a little different and wanted to ask if each of you could introduce the other person and share something that you admire most about them. And maybe Ella, if you want to, Alex, if you want to start. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I first met Ella when I was 13 years old and she was 15. And we met in a therapeutic boarding school that was for people who had a diagnosis of autism. At the time, before the DSM made the switch to autism spectrum disorders, so it was what was considered Asperger's. But obviously we had other stuff going on, otherwise we wouldn't have simply been in a boarding school for that. And what always amazed me about Ella, I always have been horrible at math. And I remember back in the day in boarding school, Ella would be on the floor of the recreation therapy room with these huge textbooks doing her calculus homework at like 15 years old. And I was barely making it past pre-algebra. Like I just remember always being so impressed by that. I was always impressed with her upbringing because she was raised in Portland, but she was always had these hip interests, like about coffee shops. She had great music taste. She taught me about like the Arctic Monkeys and a few other bands at the time that I never heard about. So she had very hip interests. And that was one of the things that also drew me to want to be her friend too. We didn't necessarily have the same common interest. There was equine therapy at our boarding school. And I was like, I'm going to wake up extra early, clean the horse stalls, ride the horses, and be back before goals group at 9 a.m., But Ella was like, I'm good. I'm going to take a nice, easy, slow morning, do my chores, breakfast. I'm not going to. And it was okay with that. Everybody's different. And she also had a love for like sparkly things. I remember she always had this epic silver jacket. But generally speaking, past our boarding school days, Ella and I didn't just go to one boarding school. We went to two boarding schools together. The first one was a therapeutic one. The second one was a normal one. So we went from this all insulated, all girls, only 12 12 to 15 other girls living in a small home to a co-ed boarding school in a farm in the middle of nowhere in Ohio with boys. So you can imagine what that transition was like for us when we both graduated treatment. And people put Ella through the ringer. Throughout her life, people have knocked Ella down. And what has always amazed me about her is that she's never became bitter about it. Obviously, she would get sad and get angry about certain things, but she always stayed true to her values of like being an honest and true friend, looking at the goodness in people, looking at their heart, even when they make mistakes, forgiving them. And like, there are people that I'm like, Ella, why did you stay friends with them? Like, oh my goodness, like, that person's crazy. Why are you doing that? And she like gives me this very intellectual, politically informed, heartful response, and it makes me a different person after I hear it, because instead of being the judgmental bitter person that I can be, I'm exposed to this light that is Ella Dolly. And Ella Dolly, in addition to all of that's just her character, her personal accolades from going on to college. She went to Lewis and Clark. She majored in some sciencey, really hard major. It's either biochem, one of those chemistry things. I don't remember 100%, but what I am going to tell you is that it's hard and it required taking organic chemistry, which is one of the hardest courses in college. She's very, very bright. In addition, she's been able to maintain stable employment for all these really great companies, while still being authentically autistic and not masking and not doing all the things that damage one's soul. She is such a genuine person, and it is an honor to share this podcast with her. I hope that wasn't too long-winded, but I wanted to introduce Ella Dolly that way.
That was so personal. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Yeah, I want to give you a chance to respond, Ella.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex. That was really thoughtful and really means a lot to me. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was such a sweet introduction that you could only get from a close friend. So thank you. Ella, do you want to introduce Alex to us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like my introduction is not going to be quite as good, but anyway, this is Alex Generous. And like she said, we met at boarding school almost 20 years ago, which is kind of crazy. I was 15 and she was 13, as she said. And so because of that, she's actually one of my longest friends, which is really special. And so I'm really glad that we've been able to keep in touch and all the good things that come along with that. And yeah, Alex is an all-around amazing human as well. And she's honestly done so much. I really am constantly in awe of all the things that she does, both for herself and for her community as well. I feel like a lot of people know her from being like a professional speaker, an advocate, and she's also a behavioral analyst among like a bunch of other stuff that she does. And what I really love about Alex's work is that it's very like intersectional and interdisciplinary, and as someone who also sort of has my career journey of work has followed that path as well. It's been really helpful to have Alex as a role model, as I step into this next part of my career, putting out my first book and everything. And yeah, Alex also loves musical theater, which is something that I also love. She's been in multiple productions in LA and Santa Fe, which is really special. And yeah, what else? She's in grad school for Holocaust and genocide studies, so she's also really smart. And yeah, I'm just really grateful to have you in my life, Alex, and to be doing this event with you. Keep being awesome and being hilarious. I love you so much.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for your introductions. And yeah, there's so much about both of you having been highly intelligent as children, and a lot of the success that you had in your early years, and even in your professional too. There's so many accolades to go on about both of you. So two very well-established women who are in their careers who've explored and been experts in the areas of expertise that you both work in. So, yeah, thank you for those introductions of each other and good friends. And so I want to start at kind of the beginning of your story together. I know that on this call, we have autistic women and autistic individuals on this call. We also have parents of loved ones who might be in our community. We have some ERG, employee resource group leaders here from companies. So we have a really wide range of attendees. But I want to start with where your story starts together, especially as teenagers and at a time like 20 years ago when we didn't have the language and the awareness like we do today about neurodivergence. And so I'm curious, as you look back over your childhood and up till now, are there certain moments where you started to see yourselves more clearly? And how did that evolve over time?
Would you like to start, Ella?
Sure. Yeah, I can
Okay.
start. So as Alex and Jessica already know, one of the most kind of game-changing and transformative and healing parts of my life was college, actually. And I had a few pretty major realizations when I was in college. One of them was spring of my senior year, and that was like spring 2014. I was 23 years old at the time, and I realized that there was nothing ever wrong with me, and that, I've kind of always been the awesome person that I am now. And that was a hugely game-changing realization for me because after that, looking back in my life, everything made a lot more sense. I realized that what I thought was, stuff that was wrong with me was actually me being silenced because of being neurodivergent and a woman and all those things. And then as far as my diagnoses go, I got diagnosed autistic when I was a young child with bipolar type 1 when I was a teenager. And then but I didn't get diagnosed with combo type ADHD until last summer. And so that's another more recent kind of time in my life that has helped me to see myself more clearly. My current therapist referred me to an evaluation. That's how I ended up getting the diagnosis. And then I did a really awesome virtual ADHD group therapy that my therapist also referred me to last fall. And a homework assignment in that ADHD group therapy is ultimately what ended up leading me to finish writing my book. It was to start a long-term project that we had been putting off, and that's one of the big reasons why I ended up being able to write my book, which is a big part of my life.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm curious too, Ella, when you mentioned that like you really came to finding yourself in college and making that decision for yourself. How was there something that prompted that? And what was your view of yourself before college in that moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a big part of what led me to that was I was bullied and teased quite a bit when I was growing up, as Alex kind of alluded to a little bit before, but it completely stopped when I went to college, like right away.
Mm,
And so I think that and then having a solid social life for the first time really in my life, um, that led to a lot of healing for me. And I think that's ultimately what led to the realizations that I had. And I think another big part of it is, in addition to this being extremely healing for me, I think it's sort of reset how I view myself and how I view kind of my past and my life. And what's also really special is that I've been able to keep that social life here in Portland ever since then. And, being on the other side of what I went through when I was growing up and having been on the other side of it for a long time now, I'm grateful to be doing this work to give other people tools and help them, especially neurodivergent, other marginalized voices, give them a little bit of their power back. So it's been pretty special.
yeah, thank you. I hate hearing that you were bullied, and unfortunately hear that so often. And I know so many neurodivergent children today are bullied, and so many parents who are trying to tackle that too. So before we talk about that, Alex, I want to give you a chance too to share, yeah, about yourself, your identity. How did you come into seeing yourself clearly and owning this part and every part of you?
I think one of the most helpful things to see myself clearly was good therapy and good transformation and change. So to describe mentally what my life was like, I almost had like a fog.
Mhm.
Um, when I was, I think 5 or 6, I got diagnosed with ADHD and bipolar. The ADHD was an accurate assessment, but the bipolar, I found out many years later, like when I was 13, was a misdiagnosis. But regardless, I was given medications to treat both conditions from that age. And a lot of my sensory meltdowns were mislabeled as like other things associated with bipolar disorder. So I grew up thinking I actually had bipolar disorder, and it wasn't until I was 13. I was in a really bad spot. That was after being like sexually assaulted, and my behavior was out of control. I was very aggressive because I was trying to process everything that had happened to me. So in my tantrums, I would just display aggressive behavior as well. And it was so easy to set me off. So I got sent to a few different mental hospitals when I was 13. And one of them was here in New Mexico at University of New Mexico. And that's where I got my autism diagnosis for the first time. And long story short, that diagnosis led to placement in the same therapy school that Ella and I met at. And because the quality of the therapy was really high and they were able to get my meds adjusted, and also not just the meds, but the structure and the environment that I needed, which is absolutely crucial because I wasn't getting that stability outside of treatment. It was almost like a fog had lifted. You feel your brain rapidly develop over a very short period of time. And it's very hard to describe, but when I tell people that I went from like age 7 to age 13 in a period of 18 months, it's true. Like I was able to learn skills and thrive in an environment. Not to say that it wasn't hard, it took a lot of work, but I was given the opportunity to do that. And it lifted this sort of fog where I began to see myself clearly and to see what good I can bring, not just to myself, but to the world around me. That I'm not isolated and alone because of these conditions. There's worth in who I am, regardless. So I would say seeing myself clearly started um, between towards the end of my treatment when I was 14 or 15.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I heard you say like very much how important the structure and the environment was for you. And I think I hear that in both of your stories, Ella, for when you got to college too. It's like I think trauma-informed therapy tells us that, you know, when you are finally in a space that feels safe and that has perhaps the routine or the structure that you need, that you can then, your brain actually has the capacity to consider and to think about yourself and to, like you're saying, for the fog to lift, which is where I think like people who have burnout, when they finally take that break, they actually have the mental capacity to reflect and reconsider. Um, and so it sounds, I'm hearing it that like the safe spaces have been really important for the two of you and for those shifts. For any of the parents that are listening right now, do you have any advice to give them if they have teenagers that are struggling with being bullied, or perhaps might need the therapy, that they notice the fog, what would you tell them? If either of you wants to answer that.
Well, I generally, I wouldn't say anything. I would ask for more details. If I'm being honest, I would be like,
Yeah,
okay, so
no,
what's going
definitely.
on?
When you're a good,
We need to,
yes.
like that's not a lot for me to go off to give valuable input. But what I will say is that increasing the opportunity for positive social interaction can have numerous mental health benefits for anyone, autistic or not, in the teenage sphere. I'm not talking about spaces where you want them to fit in and you force them to participate. I'm talking about whatever weird thing they like, having, being around people that where they can participate and being active in some sort of community, whatever that looks like. I've seen people feel content with online friends, even. Like, I know that scares families, but that's how a lot of autistic adults form a social circle, especially if they're in remote or geographic places that where they don't have access to opportunities like that. Community building skills are essential.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, thank you. For all of us as humans, we need to connect. Ella, anything you want to add there, or I can move us forward a little?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I think that's all spot on and really true. And then to add on to that, I think it's important for parents to be creative about problem solving those types of issues with their kids, their teenagers. And then also, I will echo what Alex said. I think it's really important for parents to try to get their kids like enrolled in extracurriculars related to talents or things they like and things like that. I think community is really important. And, sometimes it's hard to get that in school. It really is. But like Alex said, you can get it in other ways, like extracurriculars, online. I think online friendships are also really great. And I agree, it's the way a lot of both autistic kids and teens and adults make friends in their circles and everything. So, and I know for myself, my parents would always enroll me in extracurriculars for things that I am good at and things that I like. And a big part of that was music stuff. So playing like piano and violin and choir and things like that.
you play
Yeah.
the violin?
Not so much anymore, but I did for a long time.
20 years, and I don't know this about you. Ella plays the piano beautifully, by the way. Some of her select pieces that I love hearing her play, Moonlight Sonata is probably my favorite.
Mm, I
Um,
love that
Yeah,
song.
yeah,
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 really
it's
good.
really pretty.
I love it. Yeah. So finding the community groups, hobbies that are helpful. And I think for you both as adults too, I think many of us, like the things you loved as children are the things that you will continue to love as adults. And it's something that stays with you. And that I see in your hobbies that you both have too. So I think that's a great encouragement for parents or for anyone listening who's looking for social connection and community. Um,
There's one
I,
more thing I wanted to
yeah,
add, if possible,
please.
Jessica. The other
Yeah.
thing is there are some common themes I see with teenagers on the spectrum of varying degrees. Obviously, every case is different. For really like autistic kids that need more support with like daily living skills, that should be a priority. I think ones that need less support, um, really emphasizing life skills. Don't assume that the school's going to teach things like how to hold
Mm,
down a job, how to apply for a job, how to volunteer for a day at a soup kitchen, whatever it is.
mm,
Those are the types of skills that are going to teach life skills that are transferable to jobs when they start getting into the work market. Um, Also teaching them practical life skills like how to cook for themselves, how to have good hygiene. If there's a lot of deficits in hygiene with a lot of teenagers, autistic or not, And it's important to cultivate good hygiene, because it prevents disease if we really want to get down to it, but also it gives them their best chance in social opportunities and in work opportunities. And even though it may not be pleasant for them to put
Mhm.
on deodorant every day or to do certain things, these are the character building things that can really help make the difference between someone who feels less secure with their ability to participate in the community versus those who are more comfortable.
Yeah.
Um,
And Alex, I'm curious too, since you are an ABA therapist, which is where we have that advantage here, and you are a parent. I know for a lot of parents where they're like, I'm trying, I'm doing my best as a parent, but my child won't listen to me. And I know that sometimes having a third party can really be helpful for some of these life skills. Do you have any recommendations of the right types of therapists or programs where people can develop these skills, practice them? A lot of them are executive functions, I think. Yeah, anything to add there?
what I will say is that I don't think right or wrong therapy is the right way to do it. To phrase it, it's more every kid is unique and what resources are available to them. So I work with not just with health insurance, like in the American health insurance system, but I work with kids in other countries, kids that can't, whose families can't afford
Mm,
services. So when we talk about right versus wrong, it's more about what resources are available. And one of the main barriers is that there are resources there, but families aren't necessarily aware that they exist, or
mm,
there's other barriers preventing access to it. I think as a parent, self-care is super important, taking care of yourself, because if you're stressed out and you're dysregulated, your kid's just going to pick up on that.
mm,
So, delegate where possible. Are you burnt out trying to take care of your kids all the time? Is there a relative that can come once a week for a few hours so you can take a shower without someone burning the house down? Like, and any babysitters that are hired or anything like that, you can get them special training. There's people like
mm,
me who are willing to train them how to work with kids with special needs. And if you can't afford childcare, there are organizations like churches and family members, or organizations around, even if it's not like a church or a synagogue or whatever your vibe is, resources, accessing those resources in your community takes being able to like look them up and access them. And there are people called resource coordinators that can also help with that. That's usually available through public health plans. So that would be a great place to start, especially if you're overwhelmed and you don't know what to do. Non-compliance is normal for a teenager, not wanting to do stuff.
mm,
And I'm of one mind of, at some point we can explain, hey, part of living at home is, sometimes we have to do chores. Sometimes we have to put our dish in the sink. And you tell a teenager that, they may roll their eyes. In more severe cases, they'll throw knives at you or try to hit
mm,
you. I've worked with all types of kiddos. So that's why I'm like, every case is so individual, because first off, I don't think necessarily non-compliance is really a fun word to say. One, because it assumes that people need to comply. People don't need to comply. People need to acknowledge free will to make good decision makings. But when you're working with people on the spectrum, everybody's so different and unique that you have to meet them where they're at.
mm,
What I try to, for my kids, especially my oppositional defiant disorder kiddos, I try to tell them what is in it for them. I try to increase incentive by being like, this is why we're doing this.
mhm,
And then there's only so far that lectures can go when you're like, okay, that's fine if you don't want to clean up all the food you spilled on your floor today, but don't think you're going to get access to those video games until it's done. So that's a lot of what I do, is like teaching parents to like stand their ground a little bit and provide a little bit more structure. And then in some cases, telling parents to hold less structure or don't be upset over this. Instead, do this. Like but I think a right or a wrong way is not necessarily the way to phrase it, because
Yeah.
behavior is contextual. Throwing knives is bad when you're doing it at a parent, but if you're doing it at an organized activity that's like axe throwing, throw it at the targets, it's perfectly okay. Am I going to say knife throwing is always bad? No, I'm not, because behavior is contextual depending on, and there's no need to ever like shame, people just do what they do. I
Yeah.
was a difficult teenager. I don't know. I think Ella was the model teenager. If I had a daughter, I'd want him to be like Ella, because Ella held it all in, maybe to some consequence to herself, but she still, yeah.
Yeah.
Did
What
you have
I'm
a
taking,
rebellious phase, Ella?
Well, I'm a May Gemini, so I feel like I'm definitely like a stereotypical Gemini, and I feel like I can be devious in a good way. I can stir stuff up in a good way. So I feel like I'm sure you both are well aware by now, but part of being like one of my friends is that you embrace the Gemini like part of me.
I
yes.
love that. I'm
Yeah.
just not
Thank
going to tell
you.
people I'm autistic anymore. I'm just going to say I'm a Cancer. And
Yeah.
then I'm just going to assume everybody's so hippy dippy here in Santa Fe. I feel like that would fit in a lot more than me telling them I'm autistic.
Yeah.
I
And they'd
love
all know
it.
what that meant to be
Yeah.
your star sign.
Right.
I
Yeah.
love it. Um, I just one thing to highlight from what you were just sharing, Alex, that's so important is, yeah, it's individualized for every autistic individual, neurodivergent person, all of us. So there is no right or wrong. There's no one fit answer. What I want to highlight is that you are you are a neurodivergent professional who does train and provide this insight for parents, for the workplace, all types of concepts as a consultant and expert with lived experience. So, Alex is available if you want to dig in with her or need more help, right? Which is okay. We all do. So I just want to make sure to highlight that.
You're very
Um,
nice to advertise me, Jessica.
oh yeah, well, I'm happy to. Yeah, you are the expert. Um, Ella, I
Can I say
wanted,
something?
oh sure, yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt. It was just like, for example, dealing with people on the spectrum, the crucial thing is like, at times, it's kind of like with me, you can get like obsessed over a certain subject, or whether it's like science or history or whatever, and then you start doing that and getting that, and then you lack a feel for people. And the problem is sometimes you have to say hello to people, and then at times leave them alone. And it's a crucial balance. And one of the things I've learned is just that if you try to say hello to this person, say the people near where you live, like neighbors, and you talk to each one of them just for a few minutes, then back off, and just like try to do that every so often, then you should start having a feel for that. So people that are, say, on the spectrum, it can take a while, but then they have a feel for this. They have to know, like, leave them alone, but at the same time interact with people. And the more they do this, they can sort of develop a feel for people, what they want or what they don't want. It may take a while, but sometimes you get so involved with a subject or you study something, and then you can become obsessive with somebody on the spectrum, then they like a feel for people. So it can be changed, but the crucial thing is to interact, and knowing it's a sixth sense when to leave people alone. So try to interact with people, and then after a while, diverse, and then you can feel for these things after a while. It can be changed, but it's sometimes it's knowing when to leave people alone and knowing when to interact. And the more they interact with different people, then they can feel for it after a while about what people like and dislike, and say, okay, this is what they want or don't want, or when they want to be left alone. It takes a while, months, maybe years. Yes.
Yeah,
I think you
yeah.
make an excellent point. One of the most important points out of that too is it's so important to give yourself the opportunity to practice that social interaction, because
Yes.
if you don't, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. I'm awkward all the time. I'm just being real. And sometimes I'm like, why did I force myself to go to the farmer's market and do that little small talk conversation with the person? It like made me like seize up inside. But then I realized like it's a good skill, because the more that I do it, the more comfortable I'll be, like, not hiding, I guess.
Oh yes.
Uh, Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for sharing that, John. I think we undervalue these days saying hi to neighbors, to people in grocery stores. Like we just don't do that in the same way like we used to. So that's such a good reminder to get out. And people are typically nice and will say hi back. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, Ella, I want to turn over to you because a lot of the impetus for this conversation and where we're moving towards, especially as we consider adulthood and the workplace, is, you know, what I'm hearing of like all of, there's so much that is learned in childhood years and that do make a difference, of course, moving into adulthood. But there's still a lot of healing and self-discovery that I think we all do as adults. But I wanted to invite you, if you might, you were so gracious to offer to read the introduction of your book to us. Her book that is forthcoming is called Guerrilla Mode, a workbook for strategic liberation and empowered action. And that's so much of like what I think we've trended towards talking about today. I see the smile on your face and Alex's because we're both just so proud of you in the journey you've taken to come to writing your book. Yeah, could I invite you to read the introduction? When Alex and I first heard it, we were like, you've got to read this for everyone because I think it really closes the loop on what we were just talking about and pivoting us now into like, what are the self-advocacy strategies that are really practical and helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. That's really sweet. One thing I did want to add to what Alex was saying is I love my parents. We're really close. But one thing I now being in my mid 30s that I've really reflected on is I think some of the things my parents did really well, and they still do, are like apologizing and taking accountability when they're wrong. Kind of role
Mhm.
modeling to my sisters and I, feeling your feelings and, treating other people with kindness and loving and accepting other people for who they are. And so I just thought I'd mention that because it's been hugely helpful, not just for me, but for my sisters and honestly, a lot of people who know my parents as well. And I think that that is just like hugely important when you have kids at all, but especially if you have like neurodivergent kids.
Yeah, thank you. The modeling,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
But yes, I am happy to read my book. And little disclaimer, Guerrilla Mode is the methodology. It's so like the book title is what Jessica said, and then Guerrilla Mode is the methodology itself. So I am omitting a term because my book is not copyrighted yet, but otherwise this is like what it's going to be because I came up with a lot of new terminology for the methodology itself. Anyway, so writing Guerrilla Mode has been one of the most sacred experiences of my life. What began as survival evolved into strategy, and what began as strategy became healing. Every story in these pages carries the fingerprints of the people, lessons, and moments that shaped me. The fire, the stillness, the rebuilding. I wrote this not to prove anything, but to live as I am, whole, grounded, and free. If this book helps even one person see their own power more clearly, then everything I've walked through has already done its work. I've always known I was different. The bullying and teasing I went through growing up was an early clue, but I recognized my neurodivergence within myself long before I received the formal diagnoses: autism, bipolar type 1, and combo type ADHD. My home life, though, was a completely different story. I was raised by two medical professionals, my mom and dad, and in that environment, self advocacy, respect, compassion, and radical empathy were modeled to me every single day. When I got to college, something shifted. The bullying stopped, healing began. College became one of the most transformative experiences of my life. The moment I realized that being different wasn't a deficit, it was a power source. Later in the workforce, I realized that I was often one of the only people openly identifying as neurodivergent. I didn't mask, I didn't hide. But I also realized something else, that most of my disabled colleagues didn't know how to be openly themselves and safe at the same time. To survive, you need a strategy. That truth hit me hard when I went on my first continuous medical leave after nearly a decade in the professional world. What began as a survival instinct evolved into something deeper, a conscious, repeatable framework that worked across every context of my life. That framework became Guerrilla Mode.
That's like the
Oh,
most delicious tease ever. Like, I am ready to buy that book and read it.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Me
want to know the methodology.
too. Yes. Yeah. So, where should we begin with that? I am curious to ask, maybe Ella, you can start, but for both of you, what are some of those strategies that have helped you to advocate for yourself, and especially in the workplace? Ella, I will always remember um, when you sent me an email from your work email, and in your email signature at the bottom, where people usually have their name and their pronouns and their contact information, you had a statement that I am autistic. And I think there were a couple sentences after that. And I was just blown away by that. This was probably 8 years ago, when neurodiversity as a term was not even something that was talked about as widely. So to me, that's such a demonstration of you, as you write in your book, truly owning that and just being like, this is who I am. But yeah, so I just want to share that as an example, for anyone listening too, of like that, maybe that's the goal, like let's get there. So could you both share, yeah, what are strategies that you've taken that have become imperative for you? And Ella, if
Yeah,
you want to start,
so
give us the
sounds
Guerrilla
good.
Mode preview.
Yeah, what's the method behind the madness or whatever, right? Yeah, so I think a big part of it for me has been, how do I sustain not masking? How am I able to disclose my neurodivergence, my disabilities at work? And of course, that's been a journey. And because I've been doing it pretty much all along, it's sort of compounded over time into this privilege, this platform and influence that I have, professionally and in my personal life. But I talk about this a little bit in my book, but I feel like I have a pretty solid strategy that works really well for me. I usually start in a workplace by just disclosing to like direct coworkers and my direct boss, but I don't do it right away. I wait a week or two to do it, but I don't wait too late. And the idea there is I don't want it to be their first impression, but I also don't want them to already have made up their mind about me either. And this is also, I think it's been a good strategy for me because it gives like a week or two of me doing the job for them to actually see it before I tell them. And then when I tell them, it's usually pretty chill. My ideal way to do it is to pull someone aside, not nothing formal, no meeting or anything, but pull people aside but like one on one and tell them about, hey, these are my diagnoses. Um, I'm fine. I'm on medication. I go to therapy every week. But just in case anything ever happens, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware. And I have gotten, honestly, I don't think I've ever gotten a negative response to that ever in any of the jobs I've had. People are usually like really chill, really positive. Sometimes they'll ask me, let me know if I can help. What can I do to help? Things like that. And like I said, this is sort of compounded over time for me. And I don't consistently have my diagnoses in my email signature, but I agree with you, Jessica. That's something that I hope we can work towards through all the neurodiversity advocacy, DEI type stuff.
So I probably have more unpopular opinions that could be viewed, but at least maybe they'll make you laugh a little bit. And this is just through my lived experience. So I kind of, what I study or what I try to emulate in job interviews, I try to emulate someone who's like over prepared, slightly nerdy, and really eager and willing to do the job. But at the same time, I don't disclose my diagnosis until after the contract is signed. And I have a couple of reasons for doing that. The one is, so I believe our world, although I wish it was at this phase, I
Mm.
believe people, if they know about your disabilities and they have other qualified candidates that have the same level of experience you do, they're going to hire the non-disabled person, because that's the messed up world we live in. I'm not saying, do I think it's right? No, I think it's horrible. But I acknowledge and have accepted that, and that people will find other reasons to not hire you. So I kind of view that knowing my diagnosis is a privilege almost.
Mm.
And the truth is, if someone has my name and if an employer does their research, they'll see clearly that I'm autistic. I talk about it in multiple media platforms. I mention it on my website. I mention it on my business website. So it's like if they actually do the research, they'll know. But am I going to go and be like, I'm autistic. I have ADHD. I have PTSD, major depressive disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. Hire me. I'm the best person to do the job. No, it doesn't work like that. So like
Yeah.
learning basics about self-marketing and branding is important, because this idea of a social filter, that we get to be selective with our information that we share, that's hard for a lot of people on the spectrum. And I feel lucky that I've been able to learn that through a lot of horrible mistakes
Mm.
that I've made, but I have learned that. And so what I do instead is, then people, when you get hired, you go through the HR process and they're like, do you have any disabilities? You want to disclose any accommodations? I am what I tell, that's when I have that first admin meeting, when I meet with all my bosses. I'm like, hey, just fun fact, I'm also autistic and ADHD, and my executive functioning skills are a hot mess, and I'm going to need extra support and this and that. It took me a really long time to get to that point, but those are the skills that need to be taught: how to discern when or when not to disclose, or if you choose to disclose at all, because it depends on the on the type of job. I've applied from jobs to working in a nursery under an angry gardener, to Waffle House, to interviewing for an elite like organization that analyzes terrorism, to Google. Like, I've interviewed with all types of jobs. And what I will say is, the jobs where you're making minimum wage, where people are going to be yelling at you, are like not treating you that well, obviously don't take the job if that's the type of vibe. But they don't deserve to know your diagnosis, because regardless, they're going to be a jerk either way. So you might as well get some money out of the misery you're going to spend on that job. And I cannot stand autistic programs that say, oh, we employ autistic people, but then it's like volunteer work where they don't get paid. Even at every level of functioning, wherever a person is, they deserve to be compensated for the work they perform. That is my true belief. No freebies and no exploitation, because we're doing them a favor by giving them an opportunity. I feel like there's a lot of that narrative as well.
Yeah. Preach it. Yes. Very, yeah, with everything that you're saying. Um, I am curious, I think, there's so much to unpack here. Because I know we were talking about masking also, and I think that's something that comes up a lot, where people feel like they have to mask, like, to get an interview and to succeed in it and to get a job, which actually is true. All of us have to kind of mask and learn interviewing as a skill for that period of time to get a job. But masking can also take such a toll for people. And in your stories, I hear of, like, where you hit moments where you decided to live a little differently, or to find strategies that worked for you. Could you share about those, like, after you got a job, to keep the job, to be able to, yeah, like, when you shared those diagnoses, after that, what were the strategies that helped you to be able to keep your job and to, perform and do well and live authentically?
I would say AI note transcription has been a game changer because it holds everybody accountable to what is said. The other strategy is for serious things, only do it in writing. What people will try to do, things that are uncomfortable, they'll try to call and discuss it informally. And you always want it in writing or record it. And if they're uncomfortable with being recorded, then that's a red flag.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
that's not you being weird. I had another BCBA. I asked like, "Oh, can I do AI transcription for this call?" And they're like, "That's kind of awkward and weird." And first off, in my mind, I'm like, "What? You know what?" And also, like, we're in the digital age now. Everybody uses AI. How is that odd? If anything,
Mm.
I am the future trying to get you to catch up. Like, I don't want to be audited and just have no evidence for anything that you might have done that was sketchy, Like, I'm not going to do that to myself. I'm learning the basics of that sort of self-protection.
Mm.
Value things in writing, job offers, contracts. Things are not legit until that signature is signed. People's word is not valid unless it's followed up by action. Those are job safety skills that no one wants to talk about. They're higher level job nuance skills, because it's not just autistic people who fall for these sorts of stuff. It's also neurotypical people.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important to have advocacy in the workplace. So if you need a third person in those meetings with you to help navigate, no shame on that. You find that safe person, you explain the purposes, you do what you need to. And don't be ashamed. Don't let people make you feel weird. People are always going to have an opinion and say what they want about it, but you have to choose what's best for your safety in the work environment.
Yeah, and maybe this is where I can plug ourselves for a minute here for Neurotalent Works, where there are moments where we are called from HR leaders, neurodivergent professionals who are in a situation where they feel like they're being misunderstood, where performance expectations there's a missed mark between employee and manager, and we're brought in as that third party to translate, because I think so often so much of it with neurodivergence is like, how do we describe how our minds work? And people don't understand it. And so that's where we're able to kind of help translate. So I'll give a plug to us for a minute for that. But yeah, that advocacy and setting those boundaries, as I'm hearing you say, Alex, to protect yourself for those critical conversations, having it written down always, especially with accommodations requests that you're looking for, because the accountability to those are not always there, unfortunately. I do see a hand up, but Ella, I want to see if you want to add something there before
Yeah,
we might, yeah.
Ella has a lot of good lived experience with working for different companies too. So
absolutely. Yeah. So I definitely relate to a lot of what you said, Alex. One of the big parts about Guerrilla Mode actually is using documentation in a strategic way. So I agree, it's very important to get everything in writing. Especially if it's related to accommodations or HR or whatever, you want to make sure that it's in writing. And I've actually been in situations before where, I refused to get on the phone and I was like, this has to be done over email. And you have every right to do that to if it comes to that, for sure. So yeah, and then I think in terms of other tools I have, after I disclose when I've been in the job for a while, I think that some other things that help me are asking questions. Honestly, confrontation is one of my last resorts because I have a lot of other tools that work a lot better for me. So it's kind of like, okay, why would I confront someone when I have all these tools, like just asking questions, something that simple, instead that work way better for me anyway. And I will say though, I have learned a lot over the years through my work in therapy and on myself as well as in the workforce about, like for example, I thought the issue of perception worked against me for a long time when I was earlier on after I graduated from college and everything. And so that was something that I was trying to fix because I meant to say earlier, I feel like I pay a small cost for not masking and being open but strategic and proactive about disclosing my disabilities, because there will be occasional people who underestimate or misjudge you. But then I sort of had this moment, I want to say this was about 8 years ago now, where I realized I was like, wait, the issue of perception works way more for me than it works against me. And I think ultimately it's moments like that that led to me being able to transmute these experiences into Guerrilla Mode and writing my book.
Yeah, thank you. I see that we have a hand up. Kartik, if you wanted to ask or contribute something here to the conversation.
So hello. So what would be a suggestion for including a third person in the interview?
Well, the first step would be identifying that person. It could be, so sometimes they have people strategically who do this, like advocates. But you could also get a very assertive friend to come in with you. If you know someone who's like really pushy and is really good at laying truth down, that is the type of person you want to bring. So you could just like look at your family members even, like maybe you have a cousin who knows how to be, like whatever it is, identifying someone who can be really assertive and has experience, not necessarily in the industry, but experience talking and negotiating employment, which everybody has if they've had a job that's required signing a contract. But really the trait you want to look for is the assertiveness. If you can get an assertive person in there who's on your side, you have to identify them, contact them, and just ask them, hey, I have a meeting coming up at work. I really think I need an advocate to help make sure that I'm understanding everything correctly and that I'm reacting in my best interest. Is this something you could help me with? And these sorts of emails and ask, if you know the person well enough, obviously you can come up with that script yourself. But this is what I tell autistic people to use AI for. When you need to ask someone a formal request for something, go on ChatGPT, whatever it is. If you're against AI, then, write it out or get your good friend who's really good at writing this sort of stuff to do it for you, and just put in a prompt that's like, write an email asking this person to be my advocate. And it will put out something really polished and nice if you were worried about getting the right words out.
Yeah, and something to add there too is that under the Americans with Disabilities Act, for everyone that's in the US, you are protected to ask for an accommodation like a third party with you at these high stakes conversations. I do think that, and I think Ella, you said this, I'm not going to get the word right here, but not like antagony, but like that's the last resort from the employer side of this, where it's also just as important when you ask for this accommodation for a third party to be in that conversation with you, that you're considering that the employer will need to understand why. And Alex, the language you were just using really explained it well, that I want to make sure that I'm understood correctly. And to be able to phrase that to the employer is really important, so they understand why this is going to be beneficial for you. And that can sometimes come across, in a challenging way for employers. But again, that's why we're here, because we want to be able to explain to them that that's not the case, that it's just with different verbal communication styles and tone of voice and all these things, that things get misinterpreted. So I think that's really key, of identifying when you need an advocate with you, and then really preparing well for that conversation and having it written down to summarize from our other points that we were talking about. I want to check the chat here. Okay, yeah, seeing some nice comments here to the two of you for this conversation. For everyone that is still on, thank you for staying with us. Please feel free to submit questions that you might have in the Q&A or the chat, because Alex and Ella are here and happy to answer some of them. I do want to get back to, what we were talking about of strategies that have been helpful in professional environments. Alex and Ella, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to share today or that we can discuss?
Yeah, I think I touch on a lot of critical life skills that were, as Alex said before, that we're not taught, sometimes at all, like self-advocacy, negotiation, critical thinking. But I think one thing that comes to mind that's like super critical and really important for this stuff is timing. And that's a big part of Guerrilla Mode is how you time communication. And I agree with Alex. AI is a great tool if you are if you are comfortable using it. It's a great tool, not just for sort of third party stuff, but also for drafting emails and IMs to your coworkers, to your boss, and stuff like that. I think that that is also a really useful tool for like communication with people, even your HR, your accommodations people, whatever. And that ultimately is that I use AI as the tool with my own strategy with, developing Guerrilla Mode. I already have a lot of material for my second book. My second book is going to be similar format, memoir style workbook. I'm going to self-publish it. And it's Guerrilla Mode as well. It just goes into more depth. So, yeah, I think timing is also like another thing that's really important as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important highlight for AI. They should pay us. But where AI is kind of your companion, that can also be like, here's my going in position. Tell me all the points of resistance that I can anticipate to have from my manager, from the HR person. Like that's going to help you form a full approach to those high stakes conversations, and getting the timing right, like you're saying, Ella. I think that's so important and key there.
And
Thank you.
one thing that I think is also important to note is that being on the spectrum and having your own creative timing, sometimes I'm not able to write emails or get to admin work or do things like that until very late at night. And there are tools to help navigate the fact that, your brain doesn't necessarily work from 9 to 5, but it works. They have things like schedule sending. So if the timing is off for you to send it at 2 a.m., when it can get sent 8 a.m. the next day, or um, if you need clarification on what was said because you have a hard time short-term remembering what people said, AI note transcription is a great way to go back. You can plug it into an AI software and ask things like, what are the main points and actionable items I need to follow up on from this meeting? And it gives you a very concise bullet list, making your brain able to process that a lot easier. Like there are little things, and don't be afraid to use it. Don't let people hate on it either,
Yeah,
work
seriously, oh my
smarter,
God.
not harder. That is, yeah.
Yes, I am all for that. Yeah, Ella, anything you want to add there of like, other thoughts to that?
I guess, yeah, one of the last things that comes to mind for using AI for strategy and stuff, to what Alex said, is sometimes, HR, legal type language can be hard to understand, especially if you're like autistic or neurodivergent. And AI is a great tool for decoding stuff like that. And then also coming up with emails and IMs that are professional as well. Um,
Mm,
I know
yeah.
for me that's been a huge game changer, and I find it hard to believe that I've only been using AI for like a year, but look at what I've done in that year. So yeah.
Yeah, it keeps getting better. It's really helpful.
And like a lot
Well,
of people, there's a controversy though with AI. A lot of people get hate if they discover their message was sent using AI. And I think that's gatekeeping in the sense that you assume that all autistic people are going to have the same communication levels that you are expecting from a workplace performance.
mm,
And I think what it translates to, AI usage can be a form of accessibility in the workplace when implemented and used strategically and in certain ways.
Yes. Yep. I agree. Yeah. And I think we all benefit from that. Like having it's just a good friend that's helping you prepare, the way I see it. So yeah, thank you both. I want to open the floor to anybody who's listening that wants to ask a question, or if you want to talk to Ella and Alex about anything here that you're comfortable discussing in a larger group. But before we do that, I just want to thank Alex and Ella so much for just sharing your stories so openly, and at a time right now where there's been such an attack on and misinformation about autism and what it means to live a full life with it, that people hearing your stories and you sharing it is so powerful. And I see a lot of the nice comments coming into you both. And I hope that it's an encouragement to any other autistic or neurodivergent people who are listening today, or for friends, parents, caretakers, any loved ones, friends of neurodivergent people, because I think you've shed light on the things that really matter of how to be supportive, that is relevant for all of us, but especially for neurodivergent people that we love in our lives. So thank you both so much for being here, and want to share if there's any closing thoughts you both want to share of advice you'd give to other neurodivergent people, or anything else you want to share before we have others ask questions.
I can be best reached through
Oh, yes. Thank you.
my website. The contact form goes directly to my email. So if you hate me or love me, you can send me a hate message there or something else, and I will get it. And then also Facebook. And then I can answer any follow-up questions. I saw one in the chat about accommodations. Always happy to help. Reach out via Facebook or my website, and I'm happy to give you a list of resources. And Ella, any closing thoughts?
Yes, and please
Yeah,
share how
so
people can reach you both. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes.
oh, you're good. No worries. So, yeah, similar to Alex, you can reach me at my website, elladolly.com. And similarly, there's a link to contact me. It goes to my Gmail. There's also a link to my public Instagram, Ella Dolly. If you search my name on Instagram, you'll find it. And then that's also the link to it. But
Please spice
yeah,
up our inboxes.
right.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you both. I do see some questions that have come in here, so I'm gonna go through some of these. Let's see. One I just saw. What was the most impactful thing that a manager or a boss has done to support you? And
I
I'd
had
encourage you too,
something.
if there's something that someone did that was really not helpful, that's also helpful to share.
I had something happen to me 2 weeks ago where I was just at the end of my rope, stress wise, with this one company. And I was emotional about it. I won't lie. I was like, this is ridiculous. Admin obviously supported me, but I sent them my resignation letter. I'm like, I'm going to put in my 2 weeks notice. And then my boss knew me, and I did that at the height of my emotional reactivity. I wrote this out, and my boss was like, Alex, it sounds like you're having a very emotional reaction right now. I really hope you don't make any life-changing decisions right now. Let's revisit this conversation. Yeah, and then I was like, you're absolutely right. I don't want to quit. What am I thinking? Like, and she completely dismantled me emotionally, but in a way that was helpful. Like, she knew me well enough to be like, you're human. This is a stressful job. Um, so that human aspect is so important. Sometimes,
Yes.
especially toxic ABA companies, which don't even get me started. That's another webinar in itself.
Okay.
They'll be focused on performance metrics and all this other stuff, but other companies do that too. And if you're not meeting those metrics, there's punitive measures. So the best thing a boss or manager has done has promoted understanding and growth over punitive and final decisions, is my answer. What about you, Ella? I bet you have a good answer to this as
Oh,
well.
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. So I think some of these examples I talk about in my book, but for context, for people who don't know me, I take good advice to an extreme. So some of my career milestones have actually come from advice that bosses gave me. So, and then that all comes from therapy and working on myself and healing and stuff like that. Therapy has definitely been the number one thing that's helped me in my career, hands down. But one example that comes to mind is I had a boss, this was, I want to say like 8.5 years ago, and I felt like I was struggling with the issue of perception, like I mentioned before. And so I went to him with that, and he was like, I totally get it. That's a really hard thing to struggle with. It takes a lot to develop a good image for yourself at work, but it's really easy to kind of sabotage yourself at work. And he gave me the advice to solve a technical issue that nobody else had resolved yet and become the expert. And that is actually what led me to condense the story, what led me to my first engineering project in one of my previous jobs, like one of the first major projects that I did, which ultimately also led to me getting 2 divisional awards for that work. So that's one thing. Another thing that comes to mind that was a little bit more recent, I definitely have a favorite boss. He's not my boss anymore, and he's my longest boss that I had. It was like 2.5 years. But he's actually the one who taught me how to reverse engineer. Not really sure how I didn't know it before he told me about the concept. I mean, honestly, I think I did, but not formally. And I journal with AI, I journal with ChatGPT, and it's funny. The analogy it gave me was my boss, like, this is obviously not real, but my boss was like, here's a screwdriver. And then I was like, cool, I just built a spaceship. Because ultimately, I think that's a big part of why Guerrilla Mode exists. It's because I was able to take my life experiences and my strategy, my 5D psychological chess strategy, and put that into tools to share with other people. So yeah, a lot of yeah, I can attribute a lot of this stuff to good advice from bosses and obviously therapy.
Also, one piece of advice I also want to plug in, going off of Ella's point, is take advice from people who are successful. Don't take advice from people who aren't doing well in life. Like, people who aren't doing well love to give advice for some reason, or people who like make horrible decisions love to give advice. That's just how it goes. So be selective whose advice you follow as well.
Yes, I could not emphasize that more.
So true.
I agree. Yes. And advice from someone who's walked the shoes or similar experience before, not someone who's never worked in a corporate workplace or, in a particular industry or been in a marriage, right? Like if it's a relationship thing. Yeah, I want to double click on that. I see a hand up. Kartik, I think you have a question if you want to come off mute.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi. I thought that was the Kartik I knew. Good to
Yeah,
hear your voice.
that's good to see you. So, yeah, how are you doing? It's been a long time.
It has been, yeah. Did you have a question for Alex and Ella?
Yeah, yes, I'm also wanted to talk to you for a little bit.
Okay, yeah, we can talk privately after the session is over. But yeah, thank you for saying hi. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
but yeah,
overall it's a good session, but maybe one improvement I would suggest is maybe have slides.
yeah, slides like with the questions that we're discussing or the topics.
Visuals always help for sure.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion and the right neuro-inclusive strategy to take, actually. So I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, let's connect privately. Yeah, so we can talk one-on-one. Thanks for
Okay.
saying hi.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I see somebody who's asked a question of how to reach out for questions to raise privately. So I'll drop in the email. You can email our team at NeuroTalentWorks, and I'd be happy to answer it or to route it to Alex or Ella. And so I'll type that in the chat.
One little fun fact about Ella that I want to leave you all with. She is so much fun to go to karaoke with. So
If you're in the Portland area.
yeah,
Yes,
hit
if
her
you
up.
live in
Karaoke
Portland.
queen.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
I love it. I see another question. For those that don't know what accommodations to ask for or what might work for them, are there recommendations for a place, a website, a book, to get ideas, to identify something like a strategy or accommodation that works for them, or activities that they can reflect upon to identify what accommodations would help them?
So identifying a conversation, an accommodation is like a conversation that you have with your HR, but you want to go into that meeting knowing what you want. And how you figure out what you want or what you need to accommodate is you want to assess where your strengths and weaknesses are. I'll give you an example. I'm very good at clinical work, doing therapy, horrible at billing, scheduling, admin work, horrible at it. Very good at data collection. And so first identifying your weaknesses and then asking yourself, what is a hack or a shortcut that would make this 100 times easier? Would it be easier if somebody else dealt with it? Is it one of the core things of my job I really have to do? Um, really
Mm-hmm.
assessing that. One of the things, if you're one of those people that has a really hard time going into meetings, not knowing what's going to happen, you can ask for things like, can I have a copy of the agenda before the meeting? That will ease anxiety, any transition-based stuff. Like having an advocate, that's also an accommodation. Something that I do is I delegate all the time. I identify who are people I can delegate tasks that are really hard for me to do, that aren't necessarily necessary to my job. So really identifying what are your job things that you have to do. Are you running a copy machine, but for some reason you don't know how to fix it? That's an example where you would delegate out. So really identifying what you have to do on a day-to-day basis, because they do still expect you to do it. But if there's something that would make it easier, that's what you're allowed to ask for. You're not allowed to like not do the job, but you know, it's an individualized process. So I wish I could say it was one thing or another. One thing you could do is you could Google or search, do some research asking, okay, I really hate this part of my job. What are some accommodations that would work well for something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And let AI do the work for you. You know, you could spend hours trying to brainstorm, but that's a lot of and you may not necessarily know what's out there and what the best strategies are. So that's another thing AI is really good for, are doing Google searches. There are websites that have examples of accommodations you could ask for and templates of how you can ask for accommodations via email that don't require using AI. It's just, but it does require using a search engine. If for some reason you have a hard time with technology, get a friend to do it for you. You know, do what you need to in that regard.
Yeah, thank you. Ella, anything you want to add there?
Yeah. So I definitely agree with all of that, of course. And I think some other important things to keep in mind is it kind of depends on your work setting, like what kind of company you're at. But a lot of companies require you to have like a psychiatrist or therapist fill out paperwork for you for accommodations. So that might be obvious to people, but I thought I would mention it. Kind of depends on what state you're in. Every state is different and everything, but that is a tool as well because um in an ideal situation in my mind you're working with your therapist on the paperwork. It's a very collaborative effort, so you can tell them, can you word it this way, this is what I really need, like just very specific details, and that is really good for advocating for yourself when you ask for accommodations. Also, timing is really important. Documentation, back to the paperwork. Um, you don't want to give your company like too much or too little time from like a strategy perspective as well. That's something that I've noticed in my experience with requesting and getting accommodations as well. So yeah, and again, every company is different. Some companies I've worked at do it through a third party. Some companies I think do it through like HR itself if it's a smaller company. But I think that that's also hugely important for requesting and getting accommodations. Another tool that I would offer is, I think sometimes really reflecting and journaling and thinking about in a way that works for you what kind of support would help you do your job better. And like Alex said, you still have to be able to do the core functions of your job, obviously, but for supplemental things, Google is really helpful, but also just like reflect and think about what would make your job easier as well, because you know yourself better than anyone else does.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that self-reflection you're both talking about, the question I'd add to self-reflect on is, yeah, what parts of my job are energizing, and then what parts of my job are draining me, and why, and then what flexibility would help that not feel so draining. And that's maybe a clue into some of those accommodations, supports. And a plug I'll do for us too. We've been wanting to host our workshops and building some content of that self-reflection to help put a structure to it so that you can advocate. And so thank you all, because this is giving me the encouragement of like, yes, this is a need that the community has, and that hopefully we can put something together to share that we've been working on. I do see another hand up. I think it's Lori, if you want to come off mute and share your question as well.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much. We just had a psychological assessment for our millennial son, and he has been identified high spectrum, and I'm not sure if that's the verbiage that I should be utilizing, but correct me if I'm wrong. I also want to dovetail on the flexibility of a job. I'm actually a retired HR director, and I did that in 2017. And for the last 8 years, I am working part-time for a rather large recreational corporation. And in regards to, and I'll just dovetail on Alex's and Ella's comments regarding accommodations, I also have a reasonable accommodation as a individual who has MS. And so I understand the HR language. I utilize it quite well. I share with my colleagues because I'm a defender of the small people. And I am no longer an executive, but a line employee. And it's been interesting to be able to have the information that I have to be able to share with my colleagues, because I'm a protector of the small. And I say that visually as well, because I'm only 4'11". All of this said, my reason for being on this program this morning was to follow up with your organization and Alex in respect to finding our son assistance. And how do we present that to him? Because his statement is one that I don't want to be average. And by all accounts, my son is brilliant, and he always has been. He's very high functioning, and going into a nursing program in the fall. However, I know that there's a need for therapy regarding his acceptance of his diagnosis. And I try to use myself as an example, but I really am interested, Alex, if I could follow up with you in regards to any expert who does therapy for autism. And I just really want to say thank you to both of you. An exceptional program, and thank you. I hope there's more in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah, thank you, Lori.
Thank you so
I will.
much.
Yeah, thank you. And Lori, I should probably have you on to have a conversation with HR, an HR expert, right, for that lens of requesting accommodations, and you having lived it on both sides, I think would be powerful. And congratulations to your son too. It's very exciting for the program he got into. And we'll share out, I'll be sure to email Alex and Ella's contact information so you can reach out and connect with them.
Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, well, we're down to the last 2 minutes. We might have time for one more question if anyone else has anything. But otherwise, Alex and Ella, any closing thoughts from you? And thank you.
Just so grateful for your friendship, Ella, and I can't wait to read Guerrilla Mode.
Me too.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. Yeah, thank you so much. I really love having you guys as friends, and this has been really special for me. And thank you so much for your support of me and my book. And thank you everyone for coming today and tuning into this conversation. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, everyone here, for your contributions and for such a great community and conversation that's here with us. Have a great rest of the day.